Good afternoon. It is September 17th, Friday, 2021. My name is Brett Nackman. I'm the Director of Research with the College Autism Network. Welcome to our September 21 Canvas 2021 College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars meeting. I have to make sure I actually get the acronym right. You'd think you'd figure this out after 4 years, but wonderful to have you all here. We know many of you have been part of our Canvas community for a while. For some of you others, it might be your first time. We extend a hearty hello, and we hope that this is a useful space for you. These monthly meetings, as you might be familiar with already, are a space for all of us who are connected to autism and higher education in some capacity to gather, to exchange resources, to share information. And the big bulk of our time is to have a featured presentation. And today we're really happy to bring on Dr. T.C. Waisman, who is going to share their research. As I mentioned, a few housekeeping items. If you are in our Google Doc agenda, in which I'll drop a link once again, please just make sure your name is highlighted. We realize that there are currently almost 40 of you on the call, which is great. We just want to make sure that we have your names in our materials just to make sure that we keep everybody apprised. And as I mentioned too, to please mute your microphone if you're not speaking, but feel free to speak up whenever you'd like, or pop in a question or comment in the chat. And I think that covers some of the housekeeping items. As just a general reminder, our Canvas listserv, which is probably the mechanism in which you heard about today's meeting, is where you will learn about forthcoming Canvas meetings, as well as obtain notes and a link to a video recording of this after the fact. We also see many research studies and recruitment materials being disseminated via our Canvas listserv. It's a great space to share articles and other tools. So we appreciate folks' contributions on that front. And we also just want to briefly mention that, as you probably may have been aware of via our prior meetings, we do have an autism-specific college support programs database, which had originally stemmed from a PDF, and we are welcoming if there are emergent programs that are coming about and aren't listed on the website and have a website presence and would like to be featured on this. Feel free to get in contact with us, and we'll follow up with you on that front. And here's a little link to that database in case you want to check it out. But I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Lee Williams to give everybody an update about our forthcoming College Autism Summit.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. Yeah, the summit is, according to the platform we use that tells me every day, 39 days and about 2 hours away. Because if you're not stressed enough, that's what you want, is a daily reminder of just how quickly time goes. If you haven't been to the College Autism Summit in the past, and this is our 5th one, one of our original goals was to bring together scholars and practitioners to really talk about and inform one another's work. And so regardless of where you find yourself professionally, the summit will be a good experience for you. So let me just drop the link in here. Our early bird rates go till October 1st, and the summit itself is October 26th to 29th. So register by October 1st to get our low rates. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we are in the we have a new thing we're doing this year, which is our 2021 College Autism Network Excellence in Autism Practice and Research Awards. And we're looking for nominations for 4 awards. One is Outstanding College Autism Support Program. One is an Outstanding Neurodiversity Workplace Initiative. So if you work with an employer that you think is especially committed to serving neurodiverse employees, you might want to consider nominating them. The third is the Outstanding Research on Autism in Higher Education. So if that's your thing, nominate yourself or a colleague. And then the fourth is the Canned Contributor of the Year, someone that you think is really making a big contribution to this organization. Simple process to submit a nomination. So I'm going to drop that link. It's just a Google form, and you can take a look at that. And if you have any questions, you can always reach me at lee@collegeautismnetwork.org. And that's it, Brett.
Thank you, Lee. And can you just remind everybody once again as far as the deadline, so they make sure to have it drilled into their heads of when to get those in?
Yeah, right. The award nominations deadline is also October 1st. It's a big day here at CAN.
Okay, so 2 weeks remaining.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. So yes, definitely get a nomination in for either for yourself or on someone else's behalf to nominate them. We welcome those contributions. At this point, this is generally when we use a little bit of space toward exchanging resources with one another. If there's articles you've come across, maybe articles you've published, tools you've identified, if you're a researcher and perhaps developing a research study and want input or want to obtain participants, this is a good space to do that. So we have space in our Google Doc. If you want to drop in a link to something, you can put it in our chat or you can speak up. I'll get us started by just mentioning that there was a really interesting article that emerged first on Madison.com, Madison, Wisconsin, actually where I lived for quite a while, as well as on Inside Higher Ed, which got a lot of attention in terms of an autistic professor at Edgewood College who was denied accommodations regarding not feeling comfortable wearing a mask. This individual had sought to teach online in light of those differences, and consequently those were not honored by the institution. And it kind of illustrates a much wider issue in terms of disabled individuals not necessarily always obtaining supports they need to be successful in their learning experiences, or in these cases, teaching experiences as well. So I'd certainly encourage you to check it out. It's certainly very enlightening and speaks to a much larger issue that so many folks are facing in terms of their needs being honored. I'd also like to see if anybody else would like to share any articles or resources you've come across. This is a huge pool of people to exchange that with. So it can also be news if there are celebrations or other things you'd like to highlight as well.
I thought I would just share a link to an article from Psychology Today called "Why Autistic People Are Worried" by Spectrum 10K. This has been going around the autistic community on Twitter a lot. And I think it's really pertinent also to our work with college students. The Spectrum 10K initiative and genetic research that has an impact on autistic people who are here now. So I'll just drop that in the chat.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely be sure to put that in the meeting minutes as well. Other contributions.
Hi to everyone. I'm brand new to my position, but I have my dissertation defense next week, and my actual dissertation is on college students and their social needs in college. So I have actually done a lot of research in the needs of students, and so it's been very confirming to all the research I've done, the things that I've heard from being on these meetings just twice, things that are people saying definitely are in the literature and are right on what I found also.
Well, congratulations on reaching that milestone. That's very exciting. Other highlights or information you'd all like to share?
My name is Ariel Casio. I'm new. I don't know what else to say about myself. I was interested in joining this group because I'm trying to launch a research project exploring different meanings of autism and different meanings of work, particularly launching a study at asking autistic people about their experiences having a job and searching for a job in Michigan. So if anyone has any Michigan resources, especially, I would welcome that, but also anything else, and hopefully you'll get to hear from me on the list for recruitment, as you've mentioned, and possibly for other connections. I'm just trying to be connected with the community.
Well, welcome to Canvas. And yes, feel free to utilize the listserv toward that end.
I wanted to just briefly introduce myself as well. My name is Jordan Spencer. I am a school psychologist and board certified behavior analyst, but I work at Mississippi State University and have been running the Autism Liaison Program here since 2017. We've had it since 2015, but really appreciate, I just found out about this network this year. And so I'm happy to be connected and excited to be a part of it. So.
Well, welcome to you as well, Jordan. That is inherently the difficulty in when we have meetings now that are upwards of 50 people for everybody to do introductions, but we really appreciate for those of you who are new to the space to introduce yourselves. It's definitely a very burgeoning community.
In that case, I'll say hello as well. Hello, I'm Brian. Lovely to see you all. It's a bit late here in the UK.
Any other introductions or information folks would like to share at this point?
Brian, you were talking, but I could hardly hear you.
I'm ever so sorry. 2 seconds. Let me fix a few things, and I'll get back to you.
I think he said he's fixing his tech and will get back to us.
Hi, everyone. I've seen most of you before. My name is Christy Jambastiani. I'm from Sonoma State University in the Disability Office. I wish I had something to share. My comment is actually more asking for help. Some of you might have seen, I posted a question about resources for helping in residential life for students on the spectrum that are having basically failures navigating with roommates. So if anyone has any great resources, Lee pointed some RA training information to me, which is great. And then I'm sort of trying to tackle strategies to help roommates and of course, the folks on the spectrum to navigate roommate challenges. So if anyone has any great ideas, please let me know. Thank you.
I think I've fixed things now. Yeah. Oh, we've got nods. Lovely to see you. I'm Brian. I'm a early career researcher, University of Birmingham. I look into a phenomenon in the UK, which is specialist autism mentoring. We actually have government funded mentors in all of our universities, which is kind of nice. And we've been kind of making it up as we've been going along for the last 7 years. So I'm doing some research to make sure that it's done properly and with Autistic lead.
Thanks for the introduction, Brian. And Christy, I also want to say in regards to your comment, I assume most people probably saw your email, but if you want to drop your email address in the chat, you're welcome to do so as well. Brian, thanks for your introduction. And love the Star Wars little things on your bookcase. I can see that as well. That's a lot of character. Well, it's wonderful to have so many folks in our community. As you probably can see too, what's always been beautiful about Canvas is that we have folks across many time zones, many countries, and many different types of experiences as well. So we certainly honor and recognize all of that here. Anything else? I feel like just as I'm going to shift to the next thing, someone else joins in with a comment. So I want to allocate space for that. Okay, well, if other thoughts emerge, feel free to drop them in the chat. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our main feature presenter for today, Dr. T.C. Waisman, who's been a good colleague and friend and collaborator actually too. Over time, many of you probably know TC already through her contributions in Canvas and being part of this community. So we're really excited to have space for this presentation. And I don't think I could give a proper enough introduction to all that you do as a member of the autism community and a member of the CAN community. So TC, I'll turn it over to you to provide a more thorough context to who you are, and we'll shift into the research. A reminder to folks, if you have any questions for TC, really highly encourage you to use the chat, because we will allocate time toward the end of our hour together for going through those questions. So TC, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. Can everybody hear me? Is this okay? Great. It's raining a lot here in Vancouver, Canada, so I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. And if you can't at any point, just let me know and I'll put the headphones and microphone on. As far as introductions go, the bio I think was in the mail out. I think that's good. We can always, I can always share again later. But I've got a lot to share, so let's get right into it if we can. Let's see if this works. Uh-oh. Brett?
Yes.
We'll see if it works.
Yep, it's working. It's starting.
Is it?
We're getting there. Just may take a second.
I'm not really up on the Ring Central. Well, to be honest, I'm not really up on anything. So, okay.
We're
so here we
good.
go. If that's okay, I'm just going to get right into the conversation about my research, and then we can chat a bit after, because I just want to give you some information. So my research was on how higher education leaders, faculty, and staff can enhance services and outcomes for autistic students. It was done through the University of Calgary. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, so this was a research based in Canada. The purpose of my research was that I was looking at ways to improve outcomes for autistic students in higher education, specifically in Canada. And the challenge I had was that there's really no national research in Canada that privileges autistic student-centered perspectives when we're looking at improvements within the system, and especially ones that are focused on leadership policies and practices. As far as I know, there's still none. So I was really creating a broad research rather than a deep research, really trying to get sort of a spectrum foundation down, and in the hopes that other people will actually come after me and build much, much better, stronger research here in Canada. Okay, so here we go. So what did I know going into the research? Well, what we already know is that more and more autistic students are being recorded at university. We know that every year more and more are being recorded. More people are actually saying that they're autistic, you know, and because there are more accommodations available in some cases. There are more people who are being late diagnosed, like myself. I was diagnosed at 48 years old, just 1 month prior to grad school, which then kicked off the research because I had no idea what autism was to begin with. So more adults are now being identified later in life, and some are still, of course, not being diagnosed at all. We also know that person-centered accommodations are needed. Right now, what we're finding is that accommodations in a lot of universities across Canada, in other places as well, are really a menu of accommodations for other disabilities, but not person-centered, not really meeting the needs of the diverse range of symptoms that we have. We know that these symptoms can change over time in an seemingly unlimited variety of ways. So we really require supports that go beyond those currently available at most institutions. So in my research in particular, my participants were in 4 groups. One group was the autistic participants. There were 30 autistic participants, and of those 30, 2 of them were actually faculty. So they participated as both faculty members and as autistic participants. I had 23 leaders, 16 faculty members, and 10 staff, and I'll go into those details a little bit later. And the conceptual framework that underpinned my research, really the center of everything for me was about autistic students. The autistic students in their voices in terms of the kinds of questions I was preparing, the kind of research I was going to do. So, you know, it was basically, it was participatory in nature, but not really a CDPR, not community-based participatory research, because I was really just learning about myself as an autistic person, but also about the community. So basing it on the heart of autistic students, and then I looked into inclusion and access. What does it mean to the outcomes, for autistic students in higher ed? What are the inclusionary things that either are opportunities or barriers? Teaching and learning, that's all the way from rubric design all the way to, in classroom faculty teaching, policies and practices, everything from legal policies and practices to human rights, and leadership. And the reason why leadership looks like it's the most important thing is actually it's the most responsible position. So we, through the research found out that, and by we, I mean my PI and I, found out that, it all comes down to leadership. In the end, it comes down to the kinds of attitudes that leaders have, the kinds of resources that they'll allocate, the kinds of understanding that they have about autism. So the heart of it is autistic students. The responsibilities then tend to move from waterfalling from leaders down. So from there, I'll just quickly show you what happened in the research. Building from there, looking at transition supports for autistic students, pre-entry, coming in and going out, and self-advocacy. For inclusion and access, looking at accommodations, learning, skill building, mentoring, coaching, teaching and learning. I was looking at a constructivist approach. So in particular, a constructive alignment. So moving away from teacher-centered to student-centered and outcomes-based. What kinds of things we can do for academic development, universal design in terms of a framework that we could use. In policies and practices, looking at inclusive and person-centered policies, looking at ableism in policies, and looking at the legal alignment. In Canada, the provincial government really oversees higher education. So, how are the policies legally aligned at universities with the provincial government, and then the federal government, which is human rights and disability rights oriented. And then what does it take to be a leader, in terms of these kinds of things when we're talking about socially just pedagogies in the end? Do they need to have these kinds of skills that are entrepreneurial or servant leadership or inclusive leadership? So that's sort of the underpinning of it all. The limitations and delimitations I had in my research were that it was Canadian university experiences only. And there's a reason for that. In Canada, our college systems and our vocational school systems are run very differently than our university systems. So I chose the university system because that's the one that I was in particular. And my delimitation also was that I wanted to complete the questionnaires within 3 months and then move into interviews, then data collection and complete within 6 months. Again, very broad, not very deep research, just really trying to set a foundation. And of course, accessibility was important to me. I consulted with the community a lot because I was very new to the autism community. So I carry a lot of baggage and a lot of ableism, internalized ableism. So really, I've been checking in the whole way along. And of course, after the research is completed, still checking in. I had to fight with ethics a little bit about being able to accept diagnosed and self-identified autistic students. I thought it was extremely important for all the reasons we already know, all the barriers to diagnoses. It was an interesting conversation. We got it. That was great. Made sure everything was accessible online, and my outreach was not just through university channels, but also through social media platforms, trying to reach the autistic community where they are. So my design is a mixed methods design because I'm a pragmatic researcher. That's who I am. And so I really wanted to be able to, cross-reference and make sure that I was learning something from quant that I could then take into qual and then either confirm or deny or find out more details about. So I started with quantitative questionnaires, moved into interviews, and then moved into a crap load of iterative coding. It's multi-level sequential and then simple random sampling. So as long as you fit the criteria, you had an equal chance of participating in the research. A little bit about my participants. The autistic participants' age range, it was really great. So somebody from first year all the way to 60 years old. So a really varied amount of experiences, mainly between the 20 and 60-year-old range. So I really appreciated that. They were located all across Canada, strangely a lot from Ontario, which I don't know why, because I really don't have any connections there, but I'm so grateful for that. Also, you'll notice that the numbers are a little bit different. Even though there's 30 participants, there's a total of 37 here because, people moved universities, moved provinces, and then went to grad school in different provinces. So there's a discrepancy in those numbers, but it all works out. Level of education, again, all the way from some first-year education to graduating your bachelor's degree, to graduating master's degree, doctoral degree experiences, and one person in her 60s who graduated her doctorate degree. Leader participants, mainly all the leaders were from the dean section of the leadership hierarchy. So dean, vice dean, associate dean. And that's because they were attracted to the research because they had some understanding of autism. In fact, actually, weirdly, a lot of them had relationships and a desire to know more about autism. So they were attracted to the research. So I'm glad about that. Also because they can make a difference, they felt in their own universities, so they wanted to know more. The age range for them, not surprisingly, around 41 to 61, so mid-range to late range in their trajectory of their work life. And a good showing all across Canada in terms of the provinces. Now, none from the territories. We have 3 territories in Canada, and none from there, which I'm a little sad about because territories actually behave differently in terms of how the education system fits with the federal government. So I would have liked to have experienced that and learned more about that and brought it to my research, but that just didn't pan out in this research. For faculty, age ranges from 31 to 61 plus. So really from, mid-career, early career, mid-career, and then all the way to sort of late career, a lot in 51 and 60 range. And across Canada, pretty good showing. Again, none in the territories, but pretty good showing. And ranging in years from 1 to 6 plus, mainly in the 6 plus range. So really great insight from faculty. And with staff participants, 31 to 40, the age range to 60. So when I'm talking about staff, I'm talking about what we consider professional staff here in Canada, which is those from the Student Accessibility Office, Accessibility Services, Accessibility Advisory, those staffs that have a direct impact and influence and relationship with students. And sadly, not a lot from Eastern Canada, just sort of, Western Canada and Mid-Canada here in the Prairie provinces. I'm still happy to have the staff join me, so that was really good. And I'm just going to get straight to the findings, and then we're going to break it down, what people said and how they felt in what they learned. So, and then best practice. So there were 6 findings in my research in total. The number one finding was that leadership, it's all about leadership. And leadership needs to be inclusive. You have to live in praxis with inclusive, your own inclusive pedagogy as a leader, because you need to be able to create vision and inspire others on campus to provide services that can enhance outcomes. So it's really about what the leader can provide and how they can actually nourish the kind of environment where autistic students can succeed. Autistic voices are extremely needed in policy creation, recreation, vision, revision, to ensure appropriate fit and person-centered approach. I found no examples of autistic voices in policy creation or recreation in any of the universities. We need person-centered policies to adequately attend to the spectrum nature of autism, and key educational strategies such as universal design for learning. We need that to inform equitable learning, to benefit all students, to provide person-centered access to learning. And this is mainly coming not just from staff and students, but from faculty and leaders as well. And campus-wide education was an important finding. We need campus-wide education to reduce stigma and increase understanding of autism, and it needs to be led or informed by autistic individuals. And by campus-wide education, it's not autism days or autism weeks or those kinds of campus-wide educations. It's all year long, using theories like the innovation or diffusion of innovation theories, targeting information towards first-year students, and then differently to second-year, third-year grad students, on and on. Because what we're finding is that without having sort of repeated, education and education differently all along the the career of students, people tend to forget, or they tend to make up stories, or they tend to not have experiences with autistic students. At least they don't think so. So keeping it at the forefront is really, really important. And another finding was that there's advantages of having autistic students in the learning environment. This from leaders as well, that we found that having autistic students in the learning environment innovates best practices, enriches the learning of all students, and introduces new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. And that's not just in STEM courses, STEM programs. It's all across the board. So I'm going to get right into the nitty gritty of the experiences of each participant group. Here's a quote from one of the autistic participants. First, have someone in charge who is on the spectrum. Too many people in charge of accommodation requests seem not to understand their role. This came up all the time. The problem of autistic students having to go to accessibility, if they decided that they were going to share their diagnosis, going to the accessibility office, getting accommodations, going to classrooms, not receiving those accommodations, having to fight with profs about their accommodations, bouncing back to the accessibility office. And so I heard over and over again, can we not have neurodivergent people who are a part of this process so that they will understand what we're asking for, and lessen the sort of the burden on us. So autistic participants, when we're talking about barriers to completion of their degree, we're saying, listen, we're not given enough support to be successful in higher ed. The autism education should not fall on our shoulders. This is the gap that I kept seeing over and over again. The bouncing back and forth, trying to fight for your right, self-advocating, being self-agentic, and then burning out and then quitting and falling through the cracks. So, autism education is necessary. And a lot of students and actually faculty said, funny enough, that there are a lot of faculty members who are autistic and probably don't even know it. So, education is extremely necessary all the way across, not just for students. They also said that universities need to provide cost-effective or free autism diagnosis. In Canada, it's very difficult when you're an adult to get a diagnosis. I had to save up and pay $4,000 for the right to get a diagnosis. My daughter was diagnosed at 25, she paid $4,000. This is not accessible. So one of the things that was suggested is let's get it on campus. We have grad psychologists here. We can oversee, we can make sure that there's access to diagnoses for people on campus. And we need more of that. And a lot of autistic students, 75% experience gatekeeping and institutional trauma. And what they meant by institutional trauma is that you don't have a diagnosis, you don't get accommodations. So you can't be self-identified. You can't have a medical withdrawal if you burn out from bouncing around in the system and you burn out halfway through or 3/4 through your semester. Scholarships turn into loans if you end up quitting, which puts you into poverty, which then ruins your credit. And also there's no follow-up. If accommodations aren't being given in the classroom, there's no follow-up. There's nowhere to go with that. So you multiply that by 5 classes per semester, you multiply that by 4 years. This is a fight all the time for autistic students and they're feeling it. So faculty, here's a quote from faculty. If you have policies, trumpet them loudly, repeatedly. Coordinate with the professors, with advocates, and with students. Stop with the island mentality where you have your island, professors have theirs, students have theirs, and seldom do you visit. So faculty members really wanted to, for the most part in my research, they wanted to do the right thing. They just didn't know what it was or how to do it. So 100% of the faculty in my research recognized the importance of accommodations for autistic specific accommodations. They felt that campus-wide education was necessary. A quarter of them believed that there are accommodations for autistic students, but they had no idea what they were at their university. 56% felt that universal design is important for enhancing outcomes for autistic students. Not everybody knew what universal design was, so I explained that in the research as well, and then let them answer that question. And almost a third felt that they were unsupported regarding programs and procedures to support autistic students. So a third of them were saying, if there are supports, where are they? If there are accommodations, what are they? There's not sort of a follow-up even for them to do the right thing and to meet their legal alignment. So here's what quote from one of the staff participants. It's the constant balance between the human rights of the student and the academic standard of the program. There's the line and the line moves. So 83% of staff said, listen, we need collaboration between our accessibility office and the teaching and learning centers. So with faculty members, we need to be able to collaborate. At the time of my research, there was no actual policy about collaboration. And in fact, some accessibility offices were told that they can't talk to the teaching and learning centers. They're not allowed to cross that boundary, that the student is responsible for going between. 90% of the staff said education about autism is absolutely necessary all across campus. 75% autism specific policies are needed. A third of them said that we need to develop protocols for regular check-ins with autistic students. And this to them meant check-in in the beginning, check-in 2 weeks in, and then mid-semester, every year. And a third said that we need to develop 2-week transition programs for autistic students every year, not just first year. This is the experience of leaders. This is a quote from one of my leader participants. If we're inviting students from all kinds of neurodiverse backgrounds into the academy, then we need to support them fully to the end, and that's critical. So again, the leaders I felt that were attracted to this research were leaders who really were aware of autism on some level and wanted to make a difference on some level. 88% of my leader participants said diversity, specifically including autistic students, is important in the learning environment. 100% of my leaders said that we need to support autistic students. 80% said we need to embrace them, but only 28% of my leaders felt sufficiently educated about autism, and 30% felt that accommodations were necessary in class. So you can see that there's a discrepancy here, that they want to do the right thing, they think that it's the right thing, yeah, we need diversity, yes, we need to support, but they didn't know enough about autism to know why accommodations were necessary for autistic people in class. They didn't feel sufficiently educated. So quite an honest group, I would say. So what does it mean in terms of best practice? And so here's my model of best practice, which I named the model of best practice, but my PI put my name in front of it because she thought it was a really dumb name. So that's not my choice, but there it is. So what does it come down to? It comes down to waterfalling from leadership down, and also onboarding of autistic students' voices from the ground up. So from the root up, if we understand that autistic students can be a benefit to not only the learning community, but a benefit to educating others, if it's done in a participatory way, in a way that's respectful and allowing autistic voices to lead, then we can do something. We can actually do something here. So leaders who live in praxis with an inclusive pedagogy of their own can empower campus-wide education, autistic voices, person-centered policies. They can also empower teaching and learning the teaching and learning services. Now I can't read this. I'm quite blind at this moment. But through academic development, but through teaching and training and giving resources to universal design, through ensuring that that the understanding of socially just pedagogy is not just on paper, and also to really, and this is what faculty asked for, they wanted eye-to-eye support, which meant instructor to instructor support. I heard over and over again from faculty members, I don't know what to do. And if I could speak to another instructor who I knew had an autistic person in their classroom who gave an accommodation that I could learn about, I would like to be able to share that. But as it is, there's no sort of way of doing that. And staff support, and the staff and the instructors really wanted to collaborate and didn't have a way of doing that. And it wasn't at this moment at most universities supported. And it needs to be supported by the deans and the vice deans and that sort of area. Now, one of the biggest things that came up as a best practice is to create a mediation panel. And I said earlier that often autistic students bounce from accessibility office to faculty back to accessibility office, trying to get the accommodations they need. And then when they don't get the accommodations, they either quit, fail, drop out, melt down, have mental health crises. So there's a gap there, and we need to fill in that gap. And a mediation panel is something that can fill that gap. A mediation panel can be struck very quickly. If a student is not getting what they need within the first 2 weeks of their semester, they can call for a mediation panel. On the mediation panel, we could have an autistic expert, somebody who's autistic who has university experience, a leader, a dean, vice dean, associate dean, somebody from health and wellness, a union rep for faculty, an external teaching and learning faculty member outside of the university for some objectivity, student accessibility office, and HR and legal. The mediation panel can, within 2 hours, at least look at the portfolio of this person, the student, and see if they've been getting the resources they need. Has the faculty been given the resources they need? Have they got the training that they require? Are Are they working the training through? And if not, how can we then support, the student and the faculty member and the staff member to do the right thing and to do it in a timely manner? So this is not a punitive thing. This is an action-oriented thing, a step that it's a stopgap measure between quitting and failing and staying in, and really trying to support as much as possible and making a decision within 2 hours. And of course, finding out whether you're within legal alignment, because what happens is if a student falls by the wayside, they have a right to make a human rights claim. And so the university then gets tied up and resources and money gets tied up. So really we need something like a mediation panel, simple fix. It's, in between the two gaps. I say simple, but of course there are much more details that I can't go into in this moment. Also, we've already talked about some of the other strategies like coaching and mentoring, peer coaching and mentoring by other autistic students, transition in, transition out, and that whole area. I can't see it all, sorry, my eyes are not cooperating today, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna go into the micro a little bit and just talk about leaders, because that's where this really comes from. We know that leaders are influenced by the numbers of autistic students coming in. We know that they're influenced by legal alignment, both provincially and federally. We know that they're constantly wanting to learn best practices, we hope. But what it comes down to is the kind of environment that this is going to succeed in has to start with the leader. They have to have a value and belief and a genuine ethic of care. They have to live in praxis with a socially just pedagogy in order for this to work. So having an inclusive pedagogy, and I use the word pedagogy, even though it's about teaching, I use it in leadership because the assumption that I'm making coming from an organizational leadership background is that you're always learning as a leader. So a leader has to have an inclusive pedagogy of their own, living in praxis with a socially just pedagogy. They have to be willing to learn about autism and be educated. They have to be willing to support professors, staff, faculty members through resources and funding, support universal design training, and support autistic voices in in policies and in decision making. So the advice, I'm going to end with this. I've got a bunch more slides that I've added for you, but I just want to leave you with this and then a quick story. So advice that my leaders gave to fellow leaders were embrace autistic students because they improve the teaching and learning and they benefit the whole community. Faculty to faculty, the advice that they gave was all faculty members need to be educated on autism policies and you need to be open-minded and flexible. This is the way of the world. And staff to staff, be person-centered in your approach. Again, this is the desire that they want. They need support and resources. So I'm adding here advice autistic to autistic students and accommodations that they wanted. But I want to end this because I know my time's up. I just want to let you know that research matters, and in particular, your research matters. And this is a picture of my family. That's me with my arms crossed. I apparently had a bit of an attitude that day. But this research in particular is the love story of my trajectory through education. It took me the better part of 52 years to get a doctoral degree. I quit many, many times. I was bullied out of my education. I experienced biases and prejudice, and this was both before and after my diagnosis because of my intersectionality. And I want you to remember that the kinds of research that you do, creates opportunities or it creates barriers for the future TCs and Bretts and Dora Raymakers and Morenikes in the world, that your words create worlds. The thing that you focus on grows. So I really want to thank you for the kind of research that you're doing. I want to thank you for the kind of research that you will do in the future. And I really want to leave you with the understanding that I really appreciate, and I'm sure my community appreciates, that you continue to think critically about the kinds of outcomes and the kinds of focus that you're putting into our community. So thank you very much. That's it for me.
TC, as always, I feel like that if there was a mic drop, that would have been it. That was beautiful, extremely compelling, and always authentic. Yeah, you have many supporters here, and certainly that was illustrated in the chat as well. Would love to turn it over to folks' questions. I know there were some thoughts that emerged in terms of other autistic individuals on the call viewing you as an inspiration and certainly seeing value in your work. I'm among them as well. One question that I see here, if I can find it appropriately, This comes from Swaki in regards to, I'm curious about how you got buy-in from your stakeholders for this research. Many of us will not speak with just anyone due to a variety of challenges. Can you just talk about the buy-in process?
Yeah, so are we talking about the buy-in from the autistic community, do you think?
Yeah, so it was also relating to institutional trauma, and so how within the institution, some of us who are autistic people who have worked in or been students in or both post-secondary ed, if there are researchers, we're not necessarily going to say, oh yes, I'll do that, without understanding a bit more and there being some sort of process to get that buy-in.
Yeah. You know, I was very, very lucky, and in terms of the autistic community, you know, as soon as I learned I was autistic, I joined all the social media platforms that I could and started to learn that way. And I think that the buy-in I got from the autistic community really revolved around the fact that I was creating trusting relationships, and that people knew that I was a learner, that I'm here in terms of, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to, you know, my research was really, I was trying to gear my research to their voices as much as possible. And, you know, I mean, I'm upset even when I look at my research today, it's like, there's still ableism in my voice because, you know, I tried really hard to learn as much as I could, and I'm still trying, but I've had 52 years of this. So, you know, and I just thank my autistic participants for really being patient with me and understanding that, you know, that was me doing my best.
Thank you, TC. Another question coming in from Flo. How much do you think the buy-in depended on you being autistic? It's a really great question.
That's a really good question. I think it was really important. I don't, you know, whenever somebody reaches out to me and they're doing autism research and I find out that they're neurodivergent, I do feel like I want to support them. And so, you know, I feel like that's probably what happened. And as well, a lot of my participants who are autistic didn't feel like they ever had a voice. So they were falling through the cracks. They had institutional trauma. And here we were at 60 years old having a discussion about all the decades that went before and how, you know, how there was not a moment that they felt like they could actually speak their truths about this. So I felt really honored about that. And I think, yeah, definitely that had a lot to do with it.
And yeah, a comment in the chat illustrates patience and understanding on all sides goes a long way. What other questions do folks have? I will recognize as we're waiting for potentially some questions to emerge that there was so much content to process, TC, that I think it really just illustrates the richness, and particularly based on the variety of stakeholders you involved, and that you attended to, really being mindful of their roles, the geographic diversity, their varied experiences. I think further illustrates as I said, the richness. So I think that was a really salient element. I'm sure I have questions, but I really would like others to be able to jump in.
And also I wanted to say that, you know, coming to academia really late in the game, not because I waited so long, but because I didn't have the opportunities. And also being Indigenous Pacifica, there are some contradictions in the way that I felt like I was doing the research. And so, you know, I think when you read the research, it's, you know, there's a tension in it about, you know, being autistic, being intersectional, all of that. I didn't really speak about intersectionality very much because I felt like this was going to be too broad and I couldn't really sort of go deep on certain things. But again, I really hope that others will pick up the slack. And Ariel, by the way, was really helpful to me in my first year when I didn't know what the heck I was doing, what questions to even ask. So it's really like, I'm happy to touch base again with you.
Okay, we have a question coming in from, or now the questions are coming, great. So this comes from Nick, who asks, I love the data you presented. Are you aware of students or stakeholders' perceptions of providing mental health services to help students deal with anxiety, or depression, or other psychological difficulties?
That's a really good question. And because we didn't go into that in the research, we had informal conversations about this, but it wasn't part of the research. But I'm wondering if anybody else here knows any, because I know we have such a rich group. I'm wondering if anybody else can speak to this.
I'm out in public. But I'm Jess Monahan from the University of Delaware. We did a small internal survey of our students, and we did a series of focus groups on our campus. And one thing that we keep hearing over and over again about mental health is that the mental health on campus, the service providers, they're not equipped to work with students with autism. And so they feel like, okay, I go, but then they have no idea what they're doing when they start talking to me or providing the support. They don't understand my needs, those kinds of things. So it's an indirect answer to the question that was asked, but what we're finding is that there's just not a lot out there right now. And it's one of the main focuses of the work that we're doing, is trying to understand the mental health needs and more specifically how to address them.
Hi, I'm Lisa Panisi from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And to sort of address that circumstantially, I've noticed, students have told me, I've heard from people across the country that they get dumped sometimes from mental health professionals once they admit they're autistic, because the professional feels they're not equipped to work with them. It's actually happened to me. And that it can be very hard to find a counselor or mental health worker who does have experience, especially with adults on the spectrum.
Jess, Lisa, thank you for contributing. Really appreciate that. There's some other questions that are coming in that we'd love to attend to if time permits. So let's try to get to them. Jill says, I really appreciate your research. I am working with the Center for Teaching and Learning on our campus. If I could bring one suggestion to start with and not overwhelm them, what do you, TC, believe should be the priority for faculty professional development?
This is a big question. And also, Patrick, if you want to jump in as well, because I know that you've done a lot of work in this area. I sort of like to do grassroots and waterfall. So, from top down, it's working with leaders and, really educating them in a way that they can understand. Again, with the diffusion of innovation theory, I really like that way of working with people and getting them to understand and be educated about autism. I think is extremely important, because there's an understanding, or there's a feeling I get about leaders that and this is even post research, even in discussions with other leaders, that I know enough about autism. I watch TV. I've heard something, and so we've got a lot of misinformation out there. So I really think we need to hit it top down, but bottom up as well. There are lots of grassroots things that we can do. Patrick and I and Ava Gerba and a bunch of people are putting together a paper on neurodiversity inclusive campus recommendations. And Patrick, I don't know if you want to say a few words about that.
Sorry, not visible.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I'm here. Yeah, well, actually, a lot of the suggestions there are taken straight out of TC's thesis. And other things are things that came out of informal feedback from the members of the peer support community that I facilitated at UC Davis. Some of them come from both places, and they really try and cover both the specific questions of making supports more accessible, as well as how to promote a broader understanding and acceptance of neurodivergence on campuses, combating stigma, etc., and also things like communication accessibility. And that those recommendations, they actually came out of some trainings, some presentations that we were doing around campus, and we found when we were doing those that there's usually a few people in each audience who will seize on those and really be inspired to take them and run with them, and actually act on them. And one of the people in one of the audiences was from the University of California Academic Senate, and asked us, do you have recommendations for the university? And of course we did. So yes, it seems like there's a lot of people who have those good intentions and just need to know more, and then they can be neurodiversity champions in their leadership roles.
And maybe when the manuscript gets published, we can send that to Brett so we can send it out as well, the recommendations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're always welcome to. Want to be mindful of time, but we have one more question that I'm seeing at the moment, and if others want to stick on the line after the hour passes, you're welcome to do so. Sasha asks, thank you for a great presentation. Can you talk a bit more about the mediation panel? Is this something that you will be implementing or testing on your campus?
Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to test it on our campus. We just hired our very first neurodiversity liaison. So that was really exciting. I was on the hiring panel for that. And so she's working at the University of Calgary and I'm working with her. So we're hoping to be able to implement this at some point, if not at the University of Calgary, maybe somewhere in British Columbia here. I'm having conversations with a few universities here, but yeah, that's something that we hope to do, yeah.
Great. Well, we are getting close to an hour, but if folks want to stick around for a couple of minutes, I'm sure TC would be able to address additional questions. Can we just give a round of virtual applause and claps for TC? Thank you so much for being here, for your excellent research, and for engaging in these continued conversations and involving so many folks in that process.
Thanks, everyone.
We want to let everybody know that our next Canvas meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Hae-Young Kim from Binghamton University, who will be talking about college matriculation at the intersection of autism, language, and race. We look forward to that. You can stay apprised to those details through checking out email updates on our Canvas listserv. We'll have a video recording of this meeting for folks who want to check that out. So stay tuned for that. And we appreciate folks' continued engagement. I'll keep the meeting open for a few minutes if anybody has some additional questions or thoughts to pose to TC, but we want to recognize that it is currently 3 p.m. Eastern. So we wish everybody a fruitful rest of your day and weekend ahead, and we look forward to seeing you again here very soon. Take care.